Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Freiberger, and it kind of looks like Mother Nature is deciding to be just straight up evil here for some folks here in the Ohio Valley. You can see we got snow potentially coming up to the north and also potentially coming to the south of this area of no snow. In this forecast, we will not only be going over whether or not there is any agreement on this snow hold, but also talking about the potential for some widespread snowfall all the way from the Central Plains up into the Great Lakes region, and also potentially a little bit earlier in our forecast could be seeing potentially even a couple of inches to a foot of snow over here in Virginia. We're going to be breaking that down, as well as what the severe weather will look like across the United States, as well as we move further into the future. We have a couple shots here going into the 13th and 15th, potentially for some organized severe weather and even the chance for some tornadoes. If you do end up enjoying this forecast, please consider hitting that like button. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get down and nerdy, break all of this down. Before we can really break down what's going to be happening across the United States, we have to understand the background pattern here. And essentially, we still have this high pressure system that is hanging out down here into the southeast. And eventually, we are thinking this thing is going to slowly meander off to the right. And this is the reason why we're going to be having a little bit of a higher chance for some severe weather. When you have a high pressure system just off the eastern coast, it's going to be kind of grabbing into the Caribbean, going up into the Gulf of Mexico, and bringing that moisture and potential for some severe weather back down here into the southeast. Now, back over in the western United States, you can see generally we're going to be in a low pressure regimen, and that's what we're going to be watching here for our couple of snowstorms. First one should be happening here over the next couple of days, going into the 11th and 12th, and then after that, we're going to be watching for yet another system to develop over here near the Kansas area. And this map really doesn't really show that storm too well, but generally we are going to have some cooler air coming down from Canada because of these low pressures, and eventually we're going to start to see the atmosphere kind of get potentially primed here for some maybe a little bit more serious severe weather as we move into the 14th and then into the 15th. Look at this, a low pressure system, kind of a bowling ball, low pressure splits off from the jet stream and kind of digs down here into the United States. And look at this, you see that high pressure system over here in the East Coast? That's going to be keeping things warm and unstable out in front of this as it ejects into this area. And we're actually getting some pretty decent model agreement for this far out. Typically, we don't really see that, especially as we move into the 6-day range, but it does seem like models are agreeing for some severe weather. Now, coming over to our temperatures to determine whether or not there's going to be snow possible, yes, it is. As you can see, there's going to be some below freezing temperatures as we move through the 10th. Also going into the 11th, we could potentially see an even bigger kind of push here of some cooler temperatures, negative degree temperatures widespread here in the northern plains, kind of edging into parts of the Great Lakes region at around the 11th at 6 a.m. And then as we move throughout the day and go into the next day, you can see we get another bit of cold air moving even further down to the south. And this is going to be setting up the stage for our second snowstorm after our first initial one kind of goes off over into this region here. But then as we move further into the future, you can see that it stays pretty cold there in the Ohio Valley, moving into the Great Lakes with some negative degree temperatures there. But watch this, as we move into the 14th and then into the 15th, we start to see quite the push of some warm air coming out of the Gulf of Mexico up into the southern United States. You can see we have widespread 70s across here with what appears to be a little bit of a boundary forming here in Oklahoma and Texas. That will potentially be our cold front that sweeps across the south and into the southeast, potentially bringing some severe weather with that. Now, looking at our low pressure systems on our future radar here, we're going to be talking about the potential for some snow mainly, and then we'll transition and talking a little bit more in detail about our next couple of chances for severe weather. But as I push this forward into the future, you can see on the 10th, we're going to have some scant moisture down there in the southeast, and then eventually we start to see some moisture lift up to the north. You can see that got some energy up here, some snow falling because the air up there is below freezing, and that energy is going to try to merge with this moisture to the south, bringing some cooler air. And right where that meets, you can see that's where we're going to be seeing that rain and snow line set up, potentially all the way from southern Missouri going through southern Illinois, Indiana, and also southern Ohio, West Virginia, and even northern Virginia is going to be getting in on that. But man, where that rain snow line really makes a difference in where it is. I mean, we've been seeing kind of last minute with some of these storms that we've been having recently this month, that rain snow line kind of last minute will jog up to the north. I'm really not expecting anything different with this one. And I think that has to do with some of our models kind of underestimating the heat. But overall, we are definitely watching out for a chance for some heavier snow as it moves into northern, I almost said Mississippi. I meant to say Virginia. I don't even know how you get that mixed up, to be honest. But yeah, as we go into the 12th at around 6 a.m., we're still going to have some potential for some heavier snow there, but I still do think it's going to be a little bit further up to the north. I mean, that snow line is really hanging on there on a thread, kind of dangling, and it can fall all apart with just a little push more north with some warmth here. I mean, that cold air should be on the northern side regardless, but still some big question marks with this storm, even though we're only in the kind of the 3-day range here. But then watch right after this storm, after the 12th, we get yet another storm try to develop here a little bit later in the 12th as we get into the evening hours. You can see really starting pretty heavy snow over there near Kansas, Oklahoma, most of Missouri, getting into northern Illinois, northern Indiana as we go into the later portions of the 12th. And then as we move into the very, very early morning hours here on the 13th, we got some pretty heavy snow starting to fall for pretty much all of Michigan, northern Indiana, and even some moderate snow over there in southern Wisconsin and also northern Illinois. And as I continue to push this forward, you can see that it really doesn't stick around for too long, kind of lifts off to the north. And then, as we get into the 13th later in the evening, this storm is almost completely out of our hair. But then as we push this forward, we know that there's a little bit more warmth starting to build down there in the southeast. And look at this, as we move into the 15th, we have some chances here for some not only severe weather, but also a lot of rainfall coming into the southeast. I mean, all these storms are going to be bringing rainfall, the chances for severe weather, and also some flooding risks. So we got to watch out for that as well. But I mean, this next snowstorm is kind of within the range here. This is probably going to be the next thing we look out for. But again, keep in mind, this is going to change a lot as we get closer. The main two storms I'm watching is this one that kind of goes into Virginia, into the Ohio Valley a little bit, and then also into the Northeast a little bit, and then the one right behind it. I think these two are the ones that we're going to have most confidence at this moment, but I still expect some things to shift around. And then really anything past those two storms, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty. So, don't really believe if anybody's saying, big time snow on the 14th and the 15th going through the 16th, they could end up being right, but what they should be focusing on is telling you the amount of uncertainty. Now, coming over to our instability here, never mind, I changed my mind. Coming over to the snowfall totals here on the Euro model, you can see that as we go into the 12th, that first snowstorm could potentially drop 6 inches over there in Kentucky, also into West Virginia as well, 4 to 6. And as it moves into Virginia, we don't really see a big thick area of snow, but there's going to be a lot of snow kind of moderately falling for a long period of time. And that could pile up, by everything is said and done here. We could maybe even get some isolated spots of 6 to 8 inches. Gonna wait until we get a little bit closer to say a foot is possible, just mainly because we've really been seeing those snow lines go up further to the north. So maybe a foot of snow will be possible, but it will just be a little bit further north. Still kind of hard to see, but the trends are still kind of there for those last minute northern shifts. And then right after this one comes through, you can see that we have that second snowstorm that comes up into Kansas, also parts of Oklahoma, not Ohio, Nebraska, going into Iowa, northern Missouri, Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and also most of Michigan, getting in onto 4 to 5 inches, potentially some isolated spots of 6 to 7 inches. But the Euro isn't our only model here. So let's go ahead and check out the GFS and see what it has to say. Pretty similar here on our first snowstorm, maybe some heavier snow a little bit earlier on there in southern Missouri, causing anywhere from 2 to 3, maybe 4 inches possible in the southern portions, also of Illinois, Indiana, and also going into southern Kentucky, eastern Kentucky, and also a little bit there into northern Kentucky. And then eventually it pushes into West Virginia and Virginia with the potential for 6 to 8 inches a little bit further south here on the GFS, but we're still watching for that northern trend. Now, after this one comes through, you can see that we have yet another snowstorm on the backside, which we know is coming here. It's really just a question of how much snow. You can see the GFS is a little bit more bullish at the beginning and not as bullish at the end like the Euro. And then look at that, as it pushes up into the northeast, a little bit more extra snow, potentially almost a foot of extra snow up here in the northeast. northeast. Will that really stay there, or will this shift up to the north, removing a lot of the folks of Vermont, Maine, and northern New York out of the path for some of this heavier snow? It's still to be determined, but I think that the area where I'm more confident about is a decent snowstorm down here in the Central Plains, moving up into the northern Ohio Valley. But look at this: southern Illinois, southern Indiana, also Ohio and Pennsylvania, a snow hole there. This is the GFS. And going over to the Euro, you can see that we also have agreement. Maybe not as much there for southern Illinois, but look at that. In Indiana, parts of Ohio, and Pennsylvania, quite the snow hole. And the fact that we have agreement on that is giving me, some decent vibes here that this is actually going to confirm, where unfortunately there's going to be some folks cursing at Mother Nature because just the placement of these snowstorms is not going to be very favorable for you. But we'll see. Hopefully that snow hole, at the very least, gets smaller. I don't think it's going to disappear completely, but if it does, I'll be the first to let you know. Now, coming to our instability here, you can see that we're looking at the Euro model here, and the Euro is definitely more bullish on most of these storms, mainly some thunderstorms here going into the 11th. Still a small chance, though, for some severe weather. I wouldn't be overly surprised if we got like a last-minute marginal over there. But for the most part, we're watching out for a potential for a little bit of an advection up to the north here with some of our instability. Now, the Euro has this bringing enough instability into parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, potentially bringing it all the way into Georgia and parts of South Carolina, as well as we move really throughout the 12th, going into the 13th early morning. But the GFS is really still not on board here. It kind of brings some moisture there. It does still have some moisture going into the 12th and the 13th, but really just not that much. I mean, we're really talking about, maybe still some severe weather possible, but it would still be further down to the south. But we actually have another model here to look at over the next couple of days. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the NAM model. And as you can see, it looks similar, not to the GFS, but more similar to the Euro. You can see we have up to 1,000 to almost 2,000 joules per kilogram in some of these areas. As this trough ejects into this region, we're talking again, the 12th here as being our main day, and potentially also the 13th, but the 12th will probably be the most dangerous day out of the two. And as you can see, we got plenty of instability here. This is one of our higher resolution models, not our highest, but enough to kind of get a picture of what's going to happen here. And as I switch over to our lower level winds, you can really see anywhere from Louisiana through Mississippi and Alabama, there's most likely going to be a tornado chance with that. And also our upper level winds are not the strongest, but definitely strong enough to support a severe weather threat. And you can see here on the NAM, it is convecting storms right along that boundary of that instability and where our highest wind shear values are. So there's definitely going to be some storms, some spin in the atmosphere, and potentially enough instability to support severe weather. So we do have to watch out for this risk, as we are having more agreement between the NAM and the Euro than the GFS with really anything else right now. So still some uncertainty on this, but I really do think this is something to watch out for as we go into the 12th and potentially also into the 13th. But yeah, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I can tell you right now, it's going to be nice and warm for the Super Bowl down there in the New Orleans. And also, it doesn't seem like we should have much rain, although there's one small chance for potential a little itty-bitty thunderstorm to happen near the New Orleans area. We'll see if we see any lightning flashes on the game. But other than that, folks, have a good rest of your Sunday, and I will see you guys on the next one.